Hey y'all, coming to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, this is GovLove, a podcast about local government brought to you by engaging local government leaders. I'm Ben Kittelson, manager at RFTELUS and GovLove co-host. We've got a great episode for you today. We're here at the ICMA Conference, the 2024 ICMA Conference in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to talk to folks that are here at the conference, and we'll be talking today about climate action in Pitkin County. But first, the best way to support GovLove is to become an ELGO member. ELGO is a professional association engaging the brightest minds in local government. Now let me introduce today's guest. Kara Silbernagel is the Deputy County Manager for Pitkin County, Colorado, a position she's been in since 2022. Previously, she served as Policy Manager for the county for 9 years. She's also held positions for the National Park Service and the Jackson Hole Conservation Alliance. So, Kara, welcome to GovLove. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you, Ben. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So we have a tradition on the podcast to do a lightning round to get to know our guest a little bit, let you warm up. So my first question for you, what was the first concert that you went to?
Oh, the first concert I went to, I wasn't even prepared for that. And you got all the questions. I went to the Warped Tour, which was a punk show, punk concert series.
That's awesome. Do you remember the headliner for that year?
I want to say it was NoFX, but I feel like that it might have, or Less Than Jake. It was one of those two.
Yeah,
let's
awesome.
pull back to some 90s punk.
Yeah, that's so great. All right. So we've been at Pittsburgh for the conference this week. Has there been a highlight for you in your time here at the conference?
It's been super fun. I've never been to Pittsburgh before, so I didn't really know a lot about it. And so just being out and kind of running around, seeing the city. I got some advice from someone that there's 3 things they always think when they come to ICMA. So that's kind of been my takeaway is always see the city, meet and connect with friends from across the country, and walk away and being inspired. That's kind of my takeaway so far.
That's a good advice for any conference.
Yeah.
That's cool. I like that. That's good. All right, then my next linear question for you: cake or pie?
Can I choose cobbler?
Yeah. Okay. It's like a pie.
It's kind of like a pie, but it's a certain kind of pie.
That's awesome. I love cobbler. Don't accept the premise of the question.
Yeah.
There you go. And then where do you go for inspiration?
Into nature. Yeah.
Easy to do in Pitkin County. Yeah.
It is. Part of the reason that I live there too.
Yeah. So I'm always curious about how folks ended up in their career and kind of where they're at in their career. So what was I know I gave a quick bio, but what was your path to local government and the position you're in today? Yeah,
every path is a little follows different roads, right? And so my path was after my undergrad, I actually was focused on environmental work, and so I was working in the nonprofit field there, and through a mentor I had at the time, he said, you should really go get your urban planning and MPA program and do a dual degree. And so that's what I went into for grad school. Got very focused in environmental planning, which is why I was at the National Park Service. And as I was finishing up my master's, I was very fortunate to take an internship up in Jackson, which is when I worked for the Jackson Hole Conservation Alliance. And that work showed me I was fortunate to have a dichotomy between federal level work that I thought I wanted to do and being at the local level and seeing the impact that I got to do. And so from there, I came back and I was like local government and wanting to be back in smaller communities. And so my program, CU Denver, has the Best and Brightest program. So I actually started at Pitkin County as a Best and Brightest. And that was, I kind of said as I wrapped up, I would consider local government, or maybe I was going to go do the whole PhD route, and said, I'll give it 2 years at local government, and 10 years later, here I am.
That's great. Wow.
Yeah.
What is the Best and Brightest program? Is that like a...
It's an internship
program?
Yeah, it's a 2-year internship program that CU Denver offers.
Cool.
And then they place people in different communities around the state of Colorado. So it's joint. So especially for really small communities, it help covers some of those staffing costs.
Yeah, interesting.
Which I think makes it available for small communities to bring some staff in and give capacity. So it's great for anyone that's looking for it.
Yeah, that's cool. So I'm curious, either at your time in Jackson Hole or the first few years in Pitkin County, was there something that hey, I got to work on this, and this is how I knew I chose the right career, or want to stick with this, or was there anything like that?
So I have a very funny story that, I came in with a background in planning, and so I was like, oh, I want to be working on the master plans, I want to be doing all this, and my mentor and boss, John Peacock, he's the county manager right now, said, I'm not going to give you any project. I want you to learn to be a generalist, and we will joke about it still to this day of I fought and fought to have that project, right? I just wanted that ownership of it, and he was like, I'm not letting you do it. So it was the best thing in the world, but it honestly was a big struggle for me too, right? Like it's kind of a struggle when you think you're coming in with a expertise in a project, like you just want to feel ownership and pride in something instead of being like the generalist, and as you move up, right, you never get that. You're bouncing from everything. So that's kind of the story, but I did get to work on a ton of fun projects, and one of the big ones, which was totally out of my forte, right? I came from that environmental planning piece of it. That was my interest, my passion, and then I was working on broadband expansion.
Oh, cool. Interesting.
You know, and so for me, it was like connecting the dots. It still was about how do you bring, you know, small communities. It's the work I did in Jackson, just where my passion is. How do you really bring small communities, give them kind of the opportunity for connection?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
So in some ways, like I have a lot of connections through the broadband and tech world, which is not my forte. I don't speak that very well, but it definitely opened up a whole nother realm. So just being open to possibilities.
Oh, cool. So when he was like, I'm going to make you a generalist, was it like special projects as assigned, or did you like get to help with each department kind of along the way? Or
it was a little bit of everything. Yeah, it was like what, you know, kind of for any manager, it's like, what's the popcorn? What's the hot topic of the day? What's the hot issue of the month? So I went from like dealing with building security, internal stuff, some procurement, some workflow, to external was broadband and rebuilding some of our telecommunication sites, as well as still working on master plans. So it was all across the board, right? So some internal kind of leadership development across the organization, and external at the same time.
That's great. Well, and what great experience to get coming into an organization. Like, what way to learn it. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
So maybe for our listeners that haven't been, can you tell us a little bit about Pitkin County and kind of what they would expect, or if they visited, or what you guys are kind of responsible for?
Yeah, so Pitkin County, the county seat, is this tiny little hamlet called Aspen, Colorado.
Yeah.
I hope your listeners will get that reference. And so within Pitkin County, Aspen is the county seat, but we only have 2.5 incorporated municipalities.
2.5. Okay.
Town of Snowmass Village, and then Basalt, Colorado, is split between two counties. The rest of it is unincorporated.
Really? Wow.
And then approximately 90% of the area is all public lands. So we have a very small, it really is 2 river drainages. So we have a very small area that's developable. And then we have kind of the whole region as a tri-county region, and that really is in Pitkin County kind of where the workflow and the workforce comes through. So a lot of folks, myself included, it's very difficult to afford to live in Pitkin County. Yeah. And so similar to, I'm sure, many other communities and mountain resorts, is that we import more of our workforce. You know, some are doing up to 2 hours each way. Really? So, and that has other impacts as well, right? So a lot of second homes, but we also have a 40-year-old housing program too. So we do have a rich community, and it's rich in culture and arts. The Aspen Institute brings in some great things. So it's got a lot of different resources and fun things, and also with that comes some other aspects that are challenges for the community. Yeah. I never thought, because there's not like somewhere to commute from, right? It's kind of like by itself. So like, is there like another town that lots of folks are commuting from, or is it just like you have to find housing where you can? So it's like a river drainage, right? Yeah. And the county line kind of stops halfway through the river drainage. Oh, okay. So Glenwood Springs, Carbondale, the whole like Colorado River Valley is what we call it, and the Roaring Fork River Valley. So those are kind of feeders, and that's where people will, between I-70 and up through Glenwood, will commute up. So a lot of our workforce, and one of the challenges for our organization and a lot up in Aspen, is that our workforce is living, like I said, hour and a half, 2 hours away, and commuting daily.
Oh my God, that's a brutal.
Yeah, it's
which I'm
tough.
Sure isn't easier in the winter up there either.
Exactly, exactly. And so you think you move from cities to get, shorter commute times, easier, and in some ways you almost get longer.
Oh, interesting. So how does I imagine you also work with the cities too,
Mm-hmm.
but the local government's dealing with that. How do you, for your workforce, feel are there strategies you guys are? I know that's not the main focus of what we're going to talk about today, but I was just curious.
I think we're all looking at what strategies there are and could be. Obviously, like I said, we have a 40-year-old housing program, the Pitkin County Housing.
Mm-hmm.
It's about I'm probably going to get this. It's in the thousands, 4,000 maybe units, but that is far short of the demand. And like I said, it's 40 years still. There's workforce that's retiring in there and everything. So obviously, looking at building more housing, also looking at how do we convert some free market housing.
Yeah.
So we don't have a lot of places to grow.
Yeah.
And so also how can we convert free market housing? Because what we've seen during COVID, like many others, is just a lot of those homes that were for full-time residents are being turned over more as second homes. And so how can we keep kind of those homes for the primary? And for our workforce, just looking at different strategies all around. We kind of have like I said, a buy-down program, both for our employees, and we're just kicking one off in the community. And then obviously the hybrid workplace for those jobs. That can do it. Obviously, you can't operate a ski lift remotely, or none of us would want to be on the ski lift.
Or plow a road, or maintain your water. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh,
that's fascinating. Yeah, what a hard challenge, too. Because part of what makes it a great place to live is what is causing your issues.
Exactly.
So I'm curious. So you mentioned most of the county is federal land.
Yep.
Is national forest or?
Mostly national forest and then some BLM.
How does that kind of impact what you guys do as services as a county? Is it does that mean you have to coordinate more with the federal government on stuff, or what does that kind of look like?
A lot of coordination. We're very lucky. We're in the White River National Forest, and so we have a great relationship with them. But a lot of coordination happens. In particular, we have an open space and trails program that is its own property tax on the county. So it's well funded in comparison to our National Forest program.
Yeah, true.
And also, we've got the Snowmass Maroon Bells Wilderness, which is one of the most populated areas in the White River, on top of the ski resort. So there's just a lot of kind of impacts there. And again, like many communities, you're seeing we're loving some of our areas beyond their capacity. And so how can we go about managing that? One of the things that Pitkin County has been doing, especially in some critical areas, is we actually are doing joint funding of Forest Service rangers to help patrol some of those front country areas because it interfaces with our open space properties. Just because there's not the funding at the federal level, they're spread too thin, and so we're kind of jointly funding Forest Service rangers and enforcement officers to help. So it's an interesting dynamic when now our local programs are subsidizing our federal programs.
Interesting.
But we, and then there's obviously the ski resorts are right there, which has a lot of coordination between county land use, county planning, Forest Service planning, municipality planning, and kind of the water and all those pieces.
Oh, fascinating. And I'm sure it'll tie into some of the climate action work that you guys do too. But maybe I'll save a follow-up question until then. But I didn't mention your bio, and you've transitioned to being a deputy county manager. So I'm curious just to hear your perspective on that switch and what how your role has changed within the county and in that role. I guess.
I've been fortunate at the county. I've kind of had a progression. Like I said, I started as a best and brightest for 2 years, and then I think I was like a management analyst for 2 to 3 years. The years blend together. And then I've had these progressions along the way, and gotten to know the organization, felt very comfortable in it, and felt really comfortable in kind of that leading without and influencing without authority. Probably more comfortable than I realized. So I think once I became the deputy county manager, it was, and I guess I was an assistant too. I've had various job changes, but in general. But once I became deputy, I thought a lot of the work I was getting exposed to, was getting ready for, and the biggest surprise was still just to no longer be leading without authority, but leading with authority. And how that title change and dynamic changed for me, changed for some of my relationships with other directors and peers, and especially when new employees are coming on. I think it's not so much with those that I've had relationships, but new employees, like, I don't want to get your time. Like, no, please come to me. So that's just been, so much of this work is about the people and the relationships, and that's what I've prided myself on and gotten really comfortable and have kind of like gotten. Don't pay too much attention, I guess, to the titles, and that's part of the organizational culture. But to have recognizing those titles still can be intimidating or influencing how people interact is opening my eyes too.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I would have never thought about that. Like, obviously, like, once you get that promotion, like, it may change how folks look at you and like how they feel free or not to speak with you. So are there ways that you've tried to, like, I don't know, balance that out to be like, no, you can still come to me?
I think for a little bit I didn't, my work didn't really change. I was on some big projects, which we'll get into here. So in some ways the work didn't change. In some ways, I got a couple more departments and everything. So I don't think I acknowledged that difference. And so the strategies I'm doing is now I'm just more aware of it. And so being more intentional, like, people would come to me if they have issues, or I'll go to them. And so being more intentional to be outreaching more of how you're doing, so people know I'm approachable instead of like
assuming.
It's just kind of the assumption and the relationships that have been there.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah. And you can't just go on not doing anything new and think you're getting the same like interaction and
I'll just say it's interesting. Yesterday I went to a session about deputies becoming managers, and they almost said verbatim the same thing, right? It's you're the deputy, and so then when you're the manager, and I'm sure it's very different. I've never been a manager, but it was interesting to hear that reflection versus kind of my own reflection and that difference. Yeah,
that each level up, it's like changes that relationship within the organization, especially if you've been there a long time, I imagine. That's fascinating. So one of the main reasons I wanted to talk with you was about the climate action work that the county is doing. And so maybe like at a broad level, we could start broad and then maybe talk more specifics, but what are some of the climate action work that Pitkin County is doing? Like, how have you guys kind of approached that within the organization?
So climate has been kind of a priority for Pitkin County for a long time. We've got like a renewable energy offset program. Oh, cool. I think you might have seen that with the city of Aspen has been and partners of nonprofits in the community has been implemented since the early 2000s. So we've been doing a lot, but in 2019, we had local youth advocates actually came to our Board of County Commissioners and said, this is our crisis, not your crisis. And so our board declared a climate emergency in 2019, which really kind of accelerated the work. And kind of pushed the work that we're doing, which was amazing to see. So if anyone needs to get some climate action, have your youth come and really be strong spoken. So we had a climate action plan in 2017. It was mostly internally related to departments. What are people doing? I wouldn't say it was too aggressive. It was just like getting the foundation there. And so we've been doing a lot of different work since then. Kind of in the realm of resilience and the realm related to our land use and our building code work, our landfill, and then we are now updating that climate action plan kind of also more focused about kind of how we can be aggressive and start to move internally on some things. So we've kind of taken, big picture, we've kind of taken those departments that are more externally facing that are impacted and have the ability to influence the most, and we've been doing those in first and focusing those resources there, and then starting to do it with an update to our climate action plan.
Oh, interesting.
And I guess just last year, we had previously had a split long range and climate action position. And so in 2023, we actually brought in a climate action analyst and a full-time person to be focused on that, and are slowly building out actually a resiliency department related to housing, as we talked about earlier, climate and kind of those pieces, and resiliency for our community.
Oh, interesting. Cool. Yeah. Well, and it makes sense to start with maybe some of those external departments. So like, what's an example maybe of how you're working with them to like move some of this forward before you turn to the next one or the next department?
And it goes so broad. So, you know, our landfill is obviously, so maybe to take a step back, you know, within Pitkin County, there's kind of 3 elements of our greenhouse gas emissions. So we've been doing with the city of Aspen greenhouse gas inventories for quite a few years. And we've got the built environment, our waste, and our transportation. So that's really where we've been focusing a lot of the work. So our landfill has some really great programs related to composting, reusing, even setting up a mercantile, almost like a thrift store in some ways, because within the area we just see so much redevelopment. And you know, I think in Pitkin County the average lifespan of a building is maybe 30 years. Compared to the national average, it's pretty short, because we see a lot of scrape and replaces happening up in our community. So the impacts of that started, you know, you start to see it with the landfill, which means the life of our landfill. We've had to be really aggressive in a lot of that work, because we needed to preserve the life of the landfill, right? So you start to see it there. And then a lot of the work, especially since I became deputy county manager, we've been taking on some pretty big initiatives related to our land use and building code. So our built environment is about 60% of our greenhouse gas emissions. It's a big part of it. And like I said, we've got really active redevelopment. And so some of it is how can we look at our land use and our building codes and our energy codes to be more innovative and more aggressive, and kind of encouraging people to do the right thing when we've got a lot of big things happening in our community. And then obviously the transportation piece is in there as well. The other thing I would say that ties into it is in I'm going to get the year wrong now, maybe 2018 or 2019, we had a fire. It was actually in Eagle County.
Oh, wow, yeah.
But it was pretty much at the border of Eagle County and Pitkin County, and it threatened the power lines in the area.
Wow. Yeah.
And so it was on the 4th of July weekend, and we were 2 power poles down away from actually losing all power in the Upper Valley on the 4th of July weekend. Very fortunate, you know, it was kind of a wake-up call for all of us. And so our local co-op, Holy Cross Energy, along with some others, kind of in reflection of that, said, what do we need to do for our resiliency at the same time? And one of the things that came up is, how do we get kind of a microgrid network in the Upper Valley of, that was just like, how would we have evacuated people if that fire went further up? How would we evacuated? We would have lost the airport, some of our buses, as we started doing EV charging. So it just opened our eyes a lot. So the other big piece that we started to do is build out a microgrid network to kind of have some energy resiliency, and that it is all clean powered. And so that's kind of, so when you're like, what are the big buckets? We're looking at energy resiliency, clean energy for the Upper Valley area, our land use and our building codes. And then the landfill are kind of the big
3
focuses. And then we are also in the process of looking to redevelop our airport. And so how can we, which is in Pitkin County, that's kind of all located in the same area, like where the energy substation is. And so we're like looking at, when we redevelop the airport, how can we be really innovative of using that to be clean powered and resilient for energy resiliency.
Interesting. So I want to follow up on the microgrid. There's so much there.
I know. There's a lot.
The microgrid piece. Where do you even begin, and like what does that entail to like build some resiliency in an electric system like that? Because it sounds like the utility is separate from the county, right? It's also going to be another party that you're working with.
And we're very fortunate. Holy Cross Energy is actually going to be 100% renewable in 2030. Oh, great. So they have made amazing strides and are huge advocates and partners in a lot of this work. But after that fire, there was a convening, one of the researched areas in institutes in the area. Again, lots of resources. Did a convening with kind of our public safety, our our utilities, local governments, and just kind of said, what would have happened? They kind of played out the scenario. What would have happened, and what would we do? And mine's much greater than myself and others, kind of said, microgrids are the way that are happening. What can we do to look at that? And from that, the state of Colorado Department of Local Affairs actually had an energy challenge. Timing kind of worked out and said, what are really creative ideas that you would want to do a feasibility study to help meet the state's climate goals for 2040. And so we were able to get a feasibility research grant to basically work with our partner, Holy Cross Energy, our transportation authority, and our airport to come up with what would it even look like to do a microgrid. And that was in 2019, and I can actually, this is super exciting to share, I can share that as of last week, the first microgrid batteries were delivered, and they will be installed this winter and will be operating within the grid by next spring.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Wow.
I wouldn't say it happened quick, so right, the grant, the feasibility, looking back, I can say I guess it was quick.
So the batteries are kind of placed around the city, and you can draw on them when there's an emergency like that, and then can fill them up as
we just are starting with the first one to power the whole area. It's going to take like 8 different megawatts. We're starting with 2 megawatts, which is just that basic backbone that we need. Like for true emergency, it's not going to power everything,
the whole city necessarily.
So this is like the first step, and it's located in one area, but it will tie into the grid that's so cool. This spring.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, but it's connected then. It is connected between, so it's not just to Pitkin County facilities. So that we have an intergovernmental agreement between our airport, Pitkin County, because it's where our public works facility is, and Holy Cross about how that power would fluctuate in the case of a black sky event.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So it's been pretty interesting.
Yeah. Wow. So that's one bucket, and then you mentioned land use as another bucket. So I'm curious what that means for y'all, because I imagine one of the pressures is that maybe more density would help with some of your issues, but that may be there may be some community resistance to that. So I'm just curious how that's.
You foreshadowed that well. So land use. One of the big things that we're working on is. In 2022, the board set out a charge to staff and to the community to try and meet some of the climate goals. So the climate goal is reducing emissions from 2019 levels by 90% by 2050. Okay. Again, with what Pitkin County controls, the landfill's been doing a lot, but that still is within municipalities, broader. What Pitkin County controls most, what most communities control most, right, is your land use and your built environment. So with that being 60% of our greenhouse gas emissions, what could we do? And so we actually had a community growth a committee appointed, 26 members appointed by our board that spent 10 months together to basically say, what are our climate goals? What are our community goals? I will tell you, I'll foreshadow, a climate goal is pretty aggressive, and we want to maintain our rural preservation. So density is a little tough in there. And some other, community values to say, okay, then what's the balance that we want to strike? to meet all of those goals. And so over 10 months, they came up with some really creative, we joke all of them are probably have their master's in planning now. And they went from land use ideas to building ideas to just really innovative incentives and things that I don't even know if local governments have tried it, that we're going to do research and see, do we have the ability to even do this, or incentivize, maybe not regulate, to get people to do a lot of the right things. So for context for your listeners, a lot of in Pitkin County, our maximum house size was 15,000 square feet. Yes, we had a cap of a house size, and we were starting to see a lot of houses go up to that 15,000, which has a lot of impacts. The energy use of those homes, while the new homes are often very efficient, the building envelope is much more efficient than older homes. The additional amenities that we see added in, it's just crazy energy usage. A lot of it was... we were seeing kind of an exponential split as that house size increased. You weren't seeing economies of energy use. You were actually seeing
You're
more
going the other way.
Interesting. So a lot of it became, less about density, but smaller homes. So, the 3,000, 5,000, I know, normal in a lot of the rest of the country. Actually will help us get that. So how can we do a lot of things to incentivize those smaller homes? And right, jointly, then we want regular people to be able to afford the free market or to afford remodels or anything. So the more we can kind of focus and incentivize to those smaller homes, maybe it's accelerating permit fees, all those kind of things, and then kind of looking at, if people want to go bigger, if they want more energy use, what are they contributing to also, what are those impacts to our other community values, and what's kind of the two different aspects of the strings that you pull to get what you want to see. Yeah,
because I imagine y'all aren't alone in this tension of wanting to be aggressive in achieving climate action goals, but also not wanting to lose, the character of the community and what the people moved here for in lots of ways. And so when those are in tension, that's kind of difficult to navigate, I would imagine.
Exactly. So we're in the process of starting to implement those recommendations. The first is in a comprehensive plan. So to your point about a climate action plan earlier, is a lot of those climate pieces we're going to see on the externally facing are really going to be in an updated comprehensive plan, which is going to be really exciting to see, and those policies and how those filter into different code amendments. And I guess I should add, the other piece is the other goal that the board set was to be net zero in all new building development by 2030. So we're also being pretty aggressive in our building and energy codes there.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. So, regulation, but also incentivizing different things. Okay.
Exactly. So kind of a lot of the community, and just like many other communities, is there's going to need to be a lot of carrots, but we also need to be looking at sticks, and maybe what were carrots before now need to be sticks, right? So kind of talking a lot, what's the new baseline that we accept might be different than it was 10 years ago to really meet those climate goals.
Yeah. Interesting. That's fascinating. Very cool. Well, then, so the story example you gave around the fire was something I was curious about, since you are pretty much in a national forest.
Yes.
So that's got to be a major climate risk for y'all. So how do you guys think about managing that, or preparing for that, or mitigating the effects of wildfires, or what kind of approaches do cities or in counties even have for that kind of thing?
Well, fortunately, a very good relationship with our Forest Service, but it's not just the national forest, it's the BLM properties, but again, being rural, a lot of our private property are,
they're wooded.
Or they're 35, they're 500, they're 1,000-acre properties, right? And have scrub oak and other things. So our emergency management department works really closely with our public safety, our sheriff's office, and our fire district. So we've been fortunate to get a lot of grants about any kind of wildfire mitigation, wildfire education. Just what we can control and influence is really on those private property owners, right? Some of it is looking at updated. We do not have a wild urban interface, a WUI code.
I was almost going to ask that. I couldn't remember the acronym.
Yeah, it probably will be part of this code process. The state is also looking at adopting. So some of this, we're seeing the state be more aggressive as well.
Yeah.
And so we'll probably look at what are some updates there in the code and the regulations, and then a lot of evacuation planning. I know that especially the city of Aspen is doing a lot of work there because it influences. We're kind of a one in, one out community for 9 months out of the year. And because we do import so much workforce, we also have a lot of traffic issues. And when you compound those two things during an emergency, it's definitely top of mind for us and for the community right now.
Oh, yeah. No, that's fascinating. And it's almost like, because it happens, it's almost like hurricane planning in the South, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You just have to figure out how you're going to get folks out because it may happen, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Well, and so since you brought up your other little pot of things, transportation.
Yeah.
So obviously that ties with being able to evacuate, but it also ties with like your climate goals and stuff. So what are some of the strategies around transportation that y'all have? Because it is unique, like for folks that haven't been to Aspen, like it is just one valley.
Yes.
Like, so that folks commute up and down. So there's not a lot of like room for other routes. Yeah.
And just to add fun complexity to it, the main one in, one out is a state highway.
Yeah.
So it is not a county. So again, there's a lot of partnerships, a lot of collaboration that's working with state agencies, federal agencies. So the area, Pitkin County, City of Aspen, Town of Snowmass Village, has been working on transportation issues for decades. It has been a long-standing one. We have the country's first rural bus rapid transit system.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That was put in place, I believe, like 10, 15 years ago. And so that has helped a lot. But what we're seeing, especially now, is in the aftermath of COVID, just that, and like many communities, there's just been an exponential. We don't have the data yet. We're working on getting the data of what that increase in traffic is in transportation. So what we're doing right now in Pitkin County is just trying to get updated pieces and looking at, again, what we can control and influence most is in those county roads and those rural areas of the county, and how are we seeing traffic increase there and demand for, maybe we're seeing more home services, and so what used to be 1 or 2 car trips is now 5 or 10, or 30 or 40, or more redevelopment. And so as we look at our land and building code updates, how are we also taking account maybe the increase in transportation and traffic that's happening on those county roads?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. It's all connected.
It's all connected. You don't ever get to work in a silo, do we? Which makes it great.
Yeah, that's great. So you mentioned the group they brought together to form some of the at least the planning aspects of the plan. But can you talk about maybe the community engagement part of climate action planning? And there's probably many diverse voices within the county that you guys have to make sure feel heard. So I'm just curious about that perspective.
It's all the above, right? Well, I think maybe just to start with that process I referred to, one of the things that we did and that our elected officials, our county commissioners did, we had a broad representative of folks from all different. We had retired school teachers, we had landscapers, right, to architects and planners, to also energy experts. We actually had the CEO of our rural co-op of Holy Cross Energy was on it. We have someone that works, oh my gosh, I am escaping the name of the nonprofit. It will come to me, but we had a couple that work in the climate space, both locally and at a national and regional level. And so the benefit of that is that we had experts from all different, but also then everyone started to see. So while folks might have walked in the door, yeah, climate's an issue. They didn't kind of understand how valuable it was and the innovative things that can happen.
Yeah.
So at the end of that, we now have 26 climate advocates, right?
Yeah.
And so
because they saw the process.
They saw the
engaged.
process.
Yeah.
And they are out there talking to their friends, and they're holding our feet to the fire too, right?
Yeah.
As we start to go through this process of saying, remember, we're doing this for climate work, for our climate goals. And so making sure that stays forefront when we start to go through. So as I mentioned, we're in the middle of a comprehensive plan process. So then take all that, we're just starting our community engagement. So lots and lots of different ways to get both of those that understand kind of traditional comp plan process and why you would care. And also one of the things is how to get those that might not own property, but our workforce might not even live in Pitkin County, but why they should care, and kind of using the climate work as that piece of, we want everyone to be a part of this, because it's not just about owning property or living here.
Yeah. Everybody's part of this community.
Yeah.
I love that. Very cool. And so you mentioned you guys are going through an update. So where are you kind of at in that process? What work is there left to do? Like, where are you guys at? For
the climate action plan? Yeah. So we are updating our greenhouse gas inventory right now. One of the things, because our prior one was 2019, 2020, we were right in the middle of the COVID.
Yeah.
So we wanted
probably skewed your data.
Yeah. So we actually went back to a 2019 data baseline instead of 2020. So we're updating that to see some of those impacts. And then we are right in the process of doing stakeholder meetings, working with different departments right now to understand kind of what they had in that 2017, what they're doing, and our climate action analyst, shout out to Michael Port, he's amazing, is starting to work with those departments to also see what are the areas that they can maybe push a little bit more and think a little bit more. So we're in that, and then we'll also be working with our electeds. So there's kind of department-based, but our electeds are also very bought in, very, kind of want to see us keep pushing the needle there.
Yeah.
And so seeing kind of what are the initiatives that we want to work on. So, we've got a building electrification project. So how are we electrifying all of our county-owned assets?
Yeah.
Working on some resiliency, the airport, so some efforts there.
Okay. So working out, like, what are the strategies, the actual things that we're going to do that fit up under this plan, and that's kind of where you're at.
Yeah. So focusing mostly on kind of the departments and what they influence right now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what's in their control versus like trying to drive the community to make change.
So we very intentionally have made this not a community community climate action plan.
So why did you guys choose to do it that way?
Part of it is, we have staff that have done it in other communities and just saw it's the better piece is we can lead with what we do, right? And our own actions. So for example, our building electrification, we have a net zero goal in our building and energy code, but we better be walking the walk too. And so some of it is we can't just push it out to the community if we're not taking our own actions ourselves. And so that's why we're really saying there's still a lot of things we can do as an organization that we can be looking at. And we have departments that have a lot of that influence too. So let's keep with what we have influence in that span of control. So when you ask about transportation, that's a hard one because it's so much is based on those regional partnerships. But we do have things that we can control on county roads. So let's look at those things.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
So hopefully one day we'll get a community climate action plan, but because it means that we've taken all the low-hanging fruit off the table. But in short order, we still have a lot of low-hanging fruit that we can take action on and haven't yet.
Well, and you're also doing some big picture things that do impact the community at the same time. So like you're kind of setting the stage for that while getting your own house in order, for lack of a better word.
Exactly.
Awesome. That's great. Well, it's very cool to hear all the things you guys are working on. And if you're going through an update now, you're working on initiatives and kind of strategies, like when will the plan be updated and ready for prime time?
I think the plan will be updated, I think, in early 2025.
Okay.
So we have set the climate action plan as kind of a 5-year plan. So again, aligning with that 2030.
With that goal,
So that will be done, and then simultaneously our comprehensive plan that is kind of more that community facing, that's going to have a lot of those climate policies, will be done by summer 2025, and that is really setting kind of that 2050 vision.
Yeah.
So it's kind of setting the vision for the long term, and then we've got the climate action plan that is kind of hopefully getting into those 5-year increments.
Okay, very cool. That's awesome. Well, as we kind of wrap up our time together, what's next? So obviously you have that plan. Is there anything else that's kind of coming up in the next few months that you want to share that our listeners can keep an eye out for?
Just on the climate space, the other thing, I didn't talk much about it, but we are in the process of trying to redevelop our airport. It's actually on the November ballot, so we will see what happens. But one of the really cool initiatives that we're doing is actually looking at sustainable aviation fuels and even potentially a processing site, working with partners across the Western region.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And so in the climate space, our board is pretty active trying to see what can happen of sustainable aviation fuels, because that is obviously a huge part of our climate pieces if we can influence and make changes there.
Okay. Very cool.
So
are there
stay tuned after the November election, and we will potentially have some really cool, our goal, and this was another community process that we did, is actually to have the cleanest and 100% renewable airport operations.
Yeah.
Which is pretty aggressive, but
aggressive.
As we look at net zero, some sustainable aviation, we're pursuing some really creative things in that realm. Oh,
that's fascinating. Very cool. Okay, so we'll all stay tuned.
Yes, stay tuned.
Once you guys have this fancy new airport, you'll have to come back.
Absolutely.
All right, so then my last question for you, which is always the hardest, is...
It's so hard.
If you could be the Gov DJ and pick the exit music for this episode, what song would you pick?
This was the most stressful question. But I will say I went for a run this morning, and the one that came up was Dropkick Murphys' True Believers.
Okay, awesome.
So
that'll get you through a run.
Yeah,
all right,
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, that ends our episode for today. Kara, thank you so much for coming on and talk with me here at ICMA Conference in Pittsburgh. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Excited to hear more.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. And this has been a fun conversation. And for our listeners, GovLove is brought to you by engaging local government leaders. The best way to support GovLove is to become an ELGO member. You can reach us online at elgo.org or on LinkedIn at the handle at GovLove Podcast. Subscribe to GovLove on your favorite podcast app. And if you're already subscribed, go tell a friend or a colleague about this podcast. Help us spread the word that GovLove is the go-to place for local government stories. And with that, thank you for listening. This has been GovLove, a podcast about local government.